Yes, hello out there, everybody. Please, as you join us today, let us know where you are joining us from. One of the things we love about this show, at least one of the things that I love about this show, is seeing where the OpenCV community joins us from every Thursday morning. It is a blast to see the check-ins from around the world because OpenCV is a global community. Go ahead and pop open the chat here and see how everybody's doing over on LinkedIn Live, Twitch, YouTube. We are live all over Al Gore's internet here with our guest, Aaron Nathan of Point One Navigation. Go ahead and say hi to the nice people, Aaron.
Hey there. Nice to see everyone. Quite the variety of locations coming in.
Yes, they're popping off out there. We got Calgary, Paris, Santa Clara, Nigeria, San Jose, Turkey, Florence, Italy, Berlin, Miami, Florida, Belgium, Mumbai, San Diego, North Carolina, Uganda, Savannah, Georgia, and Morocco. South Africa, Los Angeles, Palm Beach, freezing Dallas, according to Martha. Yeah, and over we've got Adam Rodnitsky claiming to come from to be joining us from Niles, Michigan. I do not believe him. Good
That guy,
morning, Adam.
he could be anywhere.
Yeah, it's tough to tell these days. He is an international man of mystery. Adam, low key responsible for this episode. So if it doesn't go great, you know who to blame. Adam Rodnitsky. Hello, Ivory Coast. Hello, Melbourne, Florida. Hello, Indonesia, Istanbul, Pakistan. We absolutely love to see it. We'll get started in just a few seconds here. Yeah, we're live everywhere. I guess got to double check these days. Sometimes the tooling gets a little bit confused, but it looks like we're good. We got 3 folks watching over on Twitch. I'm trying to pump up our Twitch channel a little bit. If you folks have not yet subscribed on Twitch to this stream, you can go to twitch.tv/OpenCV official. We are either OpenCV or OpenCV official everywhere. So go check that out and let's boost those numbers a little bit. Speaking of boosted numbers, I'm gonna do a quick, huge thank you to everyone that watches this show. Let me go grab our little plaque. So, longtime viewers will know that our numbers have been going up quite a bit this past year. In the last 11 months since we started the new OpenCV YouTube channel, and we just passed 100K subscribers and got our 100K plaque. So, thank you so much to everyone who watches this show, whether you're just joining us for the first time today or you've been watching every episode. It means a lot to us since it's been very rewarding to bring you this information and all of the incredible guests we've been so lucky to have, including today's guest, Aaron. So thanks, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Compliment.
Yeah. All right. I think now is a totally fine time to get started. So I'll just do our little intro. Hello, everyone, and welcome to OpenCV Live. I am your co-host with the co-most, the second banana who is second to none. I'm also your plus one and only. It is Mr. Nelson if you're nasty, but you, my dear friends on this show, can call me Phil, and I'm here flying solo hosting the show today. Dr. Satya Malik is on assignment, but we have a whiz-bang guest for you, Aaron Nathan, who is the CEO of Point One Navigation, a really fascinating startup that is building alarmingly accurate location precision systems. Aaron, why don't you go ahead and say hi to the folks briefly, and I'll finish our little intro here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Phil. Thanks for having me. It's a really awesome opportunity to be able to talk to everyone here, and talk a little bit about what we're doing at Point One with precision location. Super excited to get into it, and I think there's a lot of things that the OpenCV community is doing that we'll be illuminating with location, and excited to kind of get into all those details.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that. But as everyone, I think, watching this show knows, there's a couple of things we do on every single episode of this show, the first of which is a giveaway to you in the audience. Later on in the episode, I will be asking a trivia question based on the presentation from our illustrious guest, and the first person to answer that trivia question correctly in our Zoom chat, which you can access at opencv.live, your browser will just send you to the right place. Later in the episode, First person to answer gets the OpenCV course of their choosing from OpenCV University. You can see what courses are on offer by going to opencv.org/university. I think there's still some kind of, let's find out here. I think there's still some kind of promotion going on. Oh, it looks like you guys missed it. Well, sad for you. But OpenCV is a nonprofit organization, and we depend on the support of all sorts of people and organizations, some of which are listed right here. We'd like to give a quick shout out and thank you to the OpenCV member organizations that are members as of today. Hopefully this list will grow a bit in the coming year. It's still only January, but we've got a couple of big names to add, and we're really excited about those. I'll talk to you a little bit more about those later on in the coming weeks. We've also got the Perception Challenge for bin picking ongoing right now. You can go sign up to win your share of $60,000 in prizes, sponsored by Intrinsic, our friends at the BOP, Orbic, and University of Hawaii, Manoa. This one starts February 1st officially, but you can go sign up right now, find some team members in the OpenCV Slack channel, on the forum, etc. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how people approach this problem. It's a bin picking challenge, which essentially means you'll be figuring out how to tell a robot arm to accurately judge the shapes and positions of objects, grab them, move them, and put them somewhere else. This is a really common problem in robotics, and it's not really solved per se. There's still a lot that can be done here, and you can be a part of that and take home part of $60,000 in prizes. Also coming up next week, we've got a fun little meetup with our friends at Ross, OpenCV and Ross, of course, two parts of the open source Triforce. We got 50 registrations there for our little event at the unofficial Photonics West meetup for OpenCV and Ross. This will be in downtown San Francisco. Photonics West is, of course, a really big, interesting conference for vision. Lots of incredible camera hardware. You're talking 10,000 FPS cameras, lasers, all sorts of extremely cool stuff. We're having a little meetup there. If you're in the Bay Area, please come and join us. You can find the link in the show notes for this episode. I will also post them now to our Zoom audience because, I love you all. Here is that link. Having said that, I think that is all I have to cover at the beginning of the show. You can support OpenCV by going to opencv.org/support. We've got t-shirts, we've got buttons, we've got pins. We've also got matching funds via Benevity. If you work for a large organization like Google or Apple, oftentimes they will provide matching funds for donations. So if you want to donate to OpenCV, you can maybe have your company or boss match those funds. It really goes a long way toward keeping OpenCV going and making it so we can continue to give everyone the stuff we do absolutely for free under the permissive Apache 2 license. So enough of my yapping. Aaron, welcome. Please tell the folks who you are a little bit, and the show is all yours, buddy.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Phil. Again, really excited to be here and talk to everybody. Also, very cool challenge. I just have to say that bin picking reminds me of the claw in Toy Story. It sounds like a fun thing.
That's funny. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to be here today and talk a little bit about location, which is really the core thing that I've focused on in my career and what we're doing here at Point One. So I guess before we get started, I have some slides. I'll introduce myself and show things while I talk about where I came from in the industry. But let me get started sharing my screen here so folks have the content to be able to see what we're talking about.
All right, looks great.
Awesome. So yeah, I've titled this this talk here, location, location, location. And that's typically what you'd hear from your realtor or something if you're buying a house or selling. And I think that
or opening up a hot dog stand, then also.
Yeah, right. And I think that that location is super important for those folks. But I think as we are getting towards more ubiquity of robotics and the applications of computer vision, actually location is something that is often an undervalued superpower that lets you really do computer vision in what I think is like a fundamentally better way. And so I'm going to talk about how we've done that at point one and some of the greater applications that are enabled there. And of course, there's a lot of different aspects to this that we'll go through, but the core idea is still around how do you make it so that location becomes like a piece of how you think about doing computer vision. Um, so as promised, like, let me give a little background on myself just to provide some context. There's this video playing here on the side. I am a roboticist, I guess, in my professional career. I have built drones, soccer playing robots, autonomous cars, and it's something I love to do. There's something magic about having code that operates with and in the physical world, breaking that barrier of just being on a screen. It's something that I started, I don't know, over 20 years ago, and I've become completely addicted to. So my technical background's in computer vision and sensor fusion. And I started really getting into this all the way back in the DARPA Grand Challenge, which is kind of the genesis point of what we're seeing today as, the Waymos of the world with self-driving cars and Zoox and other companies that are really making amazing progress there. If you do visit, San Francisco or Arizona, and I guess soon Miami, like you should totally try one of those things because it's an amazing experience to see how far this stuff has come. And
Yeah,
then
there's my in my neighborhood here in San Francisco, there's a parking garage that has been slowly taken over by Waymos. Like it's pretty spooky. Like late at night, like if I'm walking back from dinner or something, I go see a movie, right? And the entrance to this one parking garage will just have this kind of eerie pulsing glow as they all charge, and it's just dead silent. But yeah,
yeah, I mean
they're coming.
it's definitely fascinating, and I mean there's a ton of behind the scenes, yeah, the operation side of it. But anyway, that's for a different talk. um, yeah, and then I guess so I got into this location part of things in my first kind of real job, I guess you could say, where we were building unjammable GPS for the U.S. military, and this is something that was extremely important, remains to this day extremely important. But now we've kind of transitioned into how do we make GPS and kind of location super accurate for commercial applications. And this video is actually a demonstration that we did at a pretty famous racetrack at Laguna Seca. And it's hard to tell, but that car is actually driving in reverse entirely with the computer. And I'm on the right there in the white helmet, and our safety driver there is in the black helmet, just hovering over the steering wheel. So this was kind of a demonstration to show that car is not actually able to see the road. It's actually just using highly accurate location to drive the racing line in reverse.
That has to be, had to be pretty surreal
Yeah,
to be in the car for that, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, it's also going like 25 miles an hour in reverse, which like it's pretty scary.
it's got to
Um,
feel weird.
so yeah, shout out to the folks at Self-Racing Cars. This was an event put on by Joshua Schachter, who's really just been instrumental in making it available for folks to demonstrate this technology. So um, enough about me. Let me talk about what we're actually here for, which is location. So obviously, I've got to start with like, okay, what is location? We got to have a definition here. And when we think about location, there's like a pretty obvious definition, which is locations where we are. That's I'd say almost self-explanatory. But it turns out that that's actually really complicated because when you think about how do you answer this question, as a human, I might say, well, my location is I'm, at the office here, 231 6th Street. And that's an address. It's a way that we talk about like a specific place in the world. In a way, it's actually though relative to that street. And so I have a number on a street that tells me where I am along that street. Um, there's other ways to talk about location, like latitude and longitude, which are like points on Earth. We kind of drew a big grid over the Earth, and it turns out that I could describe a very specific point on Earth, and that point on Earth will be an absolute frame. And remember that term because that's something that we're going to get into. And then, the last piece of how you look at it is ultimately in a completely relative sense. Um, so these are kind of the three different ways that we think about location. Uh, in an image, you could imagine I just have a very simple, let's say, detector, and I have a bounding box around the car. I'm running YOLO or some detector, and ultimately, all I could say is, hey, this car is at this pixel coordinate. And maybe I can convert that into this car is 20 feet in front of me. That is all relative location. That's extremely important because it's how we design things like obstacle avoidance and everything that kind of operates relative to the host vehicle or to the host robot. And that's a very important type of location. The other type of location is ultimately latitude and longitudes, these absolute locations that kind of tie you down into the physical world, into that grid that I was talking about. And what's really cool about absolute location is that you get this like superpower where everything that we can talk about in the world that is fixed is already known to you. Meaning, like, if I have a map that basically tells me where the roads are, like, I can use that information purely by knowing where I am. And we all do this every day. You open Google Maps or whatever on your phone, it's like you get a blue dot, shows you where you are, and then you can very easily navigate to your closest Starbucks or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Um, those of us that are maybe a little older remember, paper atlases and having to figure out, where you were manually. And if you
Or
kind of,
even printing out bad directions from MapQuest
oh
and
yeah,
finding out they were not quite correct about 4 hours later.
or you miss the turn and then all the other directions afterwards are basically
Didn't make
useless.
any sense. Yeah.
Um,
Been
and
there.
so this superpower of being able to kind of use that prior information is really amazing. And so this is actually a visual showing in the automotive industry, we have a flavor of maps people call HD maps, high definition. And if you look here closely on this image, you'll notice that there's these kind of white lines actually outlining the possible routes that you could take in this intersection. And so when you think about having very, very accurate location, what it does in concert with a map is give you kind of the options ahead of time. So you can start to know things that would actually be very difficult to do with real-time perception. So for instance, like, can I turn left here? Is there a stoplight that I should be looking for? And actually, the way that this works is not that you just use maps and location or you just use perception. It turns out when you put them together and you do that in a way that's like Bayesian or a sensor fusion type of context, you can build something that is like categorically more powerful, going to be more correct, and ultimately get to a point where things will actually work. And so when you look at like production cars today that are using the most advanced kind of what they call ADAS, uh, they're not self-driving production cars, to be very clear, but they are highly advanced driver assistance systems. They're all more or less using some kind of combination of this technology because it helps you with the perception part of the computer vision problem of how do I know if this is an intersection, or how do I know if this is an exit ramp, et cetera. Um, one
Yeah,
other
it's they're about as much of a self-driving solution as they are a chicken that lays golden eggs. Like they are neither of these things, but they do call them full self-driving for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to marketing. I'm a technical guy.
Well,
You know,
that makes one of you, right? There's a certain CEO of a large automobile manufacturer who likes to pretend he's a technical guy, but he's not.
yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, for me, it's a pretty simple test. Like, if someone has to be in that driver's seat, it's not self-driving. So, it's a pretty simple thing there. So ultimately, these systems are incredibly like technically amazing, and the capacities that they do have are really, really impressive. And that impressive technology. A lot of it, yes, has to do with incredible improvements in deep learning and perception, but also a lot of it has to do with how we use map and location technology in either explicitly or implicitly through networks. And so, long story short, there's this problem of, okay, maps, location together sounds awesome. How do we get there? How do we ultimately make it so that we can make that blue dot be actually useful? So I could put a car in a lane and know that, okay, this is a left turn lane and this is the path I could take. Or I want to drive my autonomous car around a racetrack. Or I want to be able to do all these different things that are powered by this combination of a map and a location. Well, it turns out there is actually really only one sensor that is possible to do this. And that sensor is this thing called GNSS, or here in the US, we call it GPS, which are basically all the satellites, going around the Earth super fast that are used for navigation. It's the same thing that powers your phone. It's the same thing, that has been up basically since the 90s. And actually, it's been up since early 80s, maybe late 70s, but really came to power when the government turned off this thing called selective availability and made it so GPS could be really accurate.
Yeah, this is like the stuff you would see in like, yeah, like movies from the 80s where the rich guy has like the Bentley with the little like Atari graphic GPS in it.
Yeah,
Like this was that stuff.
yeah, and it's kind of wild to see how that technology has evolved. But now here you look at all these cars. These are all like the cars from the leading companies that were out there building these HD maps and even autonomous vehicles. And every single one of them has this green circle that is a super accurate kind of survey grade GNSS sensor. And that's because all of them are building these maps and this location so that they can be used in these perception tasks. And now here, yes, we're very into the car use case, but the reality is that this expands to drones, it expands to farm robots, heavy industry equipment, et cetera, that like basically everything that moves like, needs to know where it is so it can do something useful, be safe about it, and ultimately, do all the things that we talked about in terms of making the value out of this HD map with location. So the problem that we have is that while GNSS gives you a position, like we've all used this on our phones, and a lot of times it's not super accurate. And the resolution that you get on the phone is kind of good enough to tell you, okay, turn left at this street, or like maybe this house is coming up soon, but not enough to tell you, hey, you're in this lane, or even more accurately, like you're 1 foot to the left in this lane. And that's partly because of this issue. So these red circles represent kind of the difference between GPS or GNSS, what we call like just out of the box, unaided, what you see on your phone, or even like a pretty high-end receiver. It's able to do about 2 to 4 meters of accuracy, which, to be clear, is amazing. You have to remember, these are like satellites, 20,000 kilometers over
Yeah,
Earth.
practically a miracle already. Yes.
Yeah. And it's free. Like you're like, wow, this is an amazing service of the governments of all these countries that have been put up in space, and we just use it without any real payment. And that there's nothing really like that. So, that's
They got it right one time and decided to never do it again.
yeah, and honestly, it was like one of these like mistakes that happened where there was just, obviously the real intent of it. There's an Air Force squadron that actually runs GPS. It's a military asset, but they were like, hey, you commercial guys, you could use it in the corner, and now I think they measure something like $1 trillion or something crazy of economic value that this has created. Now that 2 to 4 meters, though, that's really impressive, but it's not actually all that great for robotics, because robotics really requires a higher level of precision. And so there's this thing that we call corrected GNSS, which is this 10 centimeter, and now, you could do down to really like 3 centimeters. Um, and what you're correcting are basically these like things that happen from the time the satellite sends the signal to the time that you receive it on Earth. Like as the signal makes that journey, you have all these different like components. Like the satellite's slightly in the wrong spot, if like the clock is slightly off on the satellite, and then ultimately there's these components of the atmosphere, specifically the ionosphere and the troposphere, that change like the speed of radio signals. And so, as you can imagine, like we're using this radio signal to measure the distance from you to a satellite. You get 4 of these, and you can kind of trilaterate where you are on Earth. Um, if you can make those measurements be perfect, you can have highly accurate position on Earth. And so the problem becomes, how do you figure out what those error factors are, and then can you correct them? And so the answer is yes. And so that's great, because ultimately what you do is you build something that one of the guys at the company, he uses this analogy, and I steal it, which is you can build like reading glasses for your GPS receiver. And what it's doing is effectively just making a correction to all the signals that you see based on measuring those effects. And the way you measure those effects is you actually put down a bunch of sensors all around the Earth that can know exactly where they are and kind of calculate GPS backwards, where if I know exactly where I am, I could start to back out what those effects are over time, and then effectively build a big model of what all those effects are, and then offer that data down like over a cell link or whatever IP link to a GPS receiver. And then more or less what happens is the GPS receiver says, okay, well, I received the signal. I know all these errors. I'll just subtract those out. And now I've got this like perfect measurement to the satellite. I wish it were that simple, but it's basically that simple. So, and so, what we've done at point one is we built these sensors, basically from scratch, that allow us to measure this, and then we scaled it. So having one of these generally will get you accuracy, let's say within like a 40, 50 kilometer kind of radius around the sensor. And that's because like once you're further away, those effects of the ionosphere and the troposphere, like they kind of are different, because you're like experience basically different space weather when you're that far away. Right. So effectively, we had to build a network of sensors that allowed us to understand what is space weather across very large geographies. So what you see here, each one of those blue dots actually represents like one of the sensors that we've deployed into the field. And so these are all operating continuously in real time and actually sending data back to like a central server. Central server does a bunch of math that basically calculates what are these components. And then if you're a car, a drone, a lawnmower, all these things, they can basically call back home and be like, hey, I'm operating here in San Francisco. I see these satellites, what's the errors that I should expect here? And then effectively subtract those out. So this technology is called RTK, real-time kinematic, and it's basically a method that's been around for a long time. Like you've probably seen, surveyors with tripods out there doing work. It's been used in agriculture. 20 years ago, when I was doing the DARPA Grand Challenges, we literally bought a receiver from a company, Trimble, that made it for tractors, and then we, repurposed it to be put on an autonomous car. And back then, those things were like, I don't know, 20 grand. So it's,
Yeah,
not exactly.
you're very careful when you're attaching it.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's candidly, like these networks didn't exist. So it would take the thing like 30 minutes to get to some level of accuracy. And even then it was fragile. Fast forward, I mean, now you can do this for, $100 less if you're, a big company building lots of things. And so the scale and the economics of being able to get to like centimeters in this absolute frame are amazing. And so, we'll see customers literally building scooters. We'll see customers building lawnmowers, not like big ones, it's like more or less like supersized Roombas that go cut your, your grass. And
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Our old coworkers of mine at Scythe Robotics are one of those. Like they
oh
make
yeah,
some pretty dang cool autonomous cutters. Yeah,
yeah, no, I mean, and their thing is really awesome because it's like a big guy that goes and does golf courses, that stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's it's amazing because it enables so many of these early use cases in robotics, because it goes back to that core thesis of when you have location, you can make all of your other perception stack better. Uh, and like a lawnmower is a great example to talk through because if you're mowing a golf course, you got to know, like, if you're on one type of turf or the other type of turf to change, the height of the deck and all these other things that are really, really important to people that play golf. And to be able to do that with perception alone is super difficult. But to just know where you are and have a map, it becomes actually trivial. And then you can use your perception to kind of do the things that you can't predict, like, oh, is there a person on the golf course or a dog or a deer or something, and I have to make sure to stop the machine. Uh, and so at some level, that's the amazing part of this, is that you can kind of like use the right sensor for the right task. And I don't know, as a roboticist, it's always about how do I like look at the problem and then take technology that is not yet like does everything, but attach the right solutions to the right problems. And that's how you make things that actually really work. Um, so anyway, just going through this, I mean, I think that that is one part of the equation. Okay, cool. So we've got like centimeter level accuracy, but the reality is that that's still not enough, because even when you fix all those signals that we talked about, there's an assumption baked in there that you can see the satellite. There's a lot of places where like you're operating, it's really important, but like you can't see the sky. And so here's an example of driving in like downtown Manhattan where there's tall buildings in the way. And if you've ever tried to hail an Uber in any downtown area, it's kind of like Russian roulette if they're going to arrive on the right street or forget about the right side of the street. And this is something where positioning is really, really difficult in these environments. And so you got to do something else. You got to bring something else to the table. And so uh, this is the second piece of what we do, which is ultimately sensor fusion. Sensor fusion is this like really amazing thing that happens where you take a bunch of different sensors that maybe solve different parts of a problem and you combine them together. And it's not like naive where, okay, I have one sensor that works in this environment and one sensor that works in this environment, and I have an if statement that switches between the two of them. I guess technically you could call that sensor fusion, but that's not really what's amazing about it. What's amazing is a lot of overlap happens between these sensors, and when you bring them together, they actually can perform significantly better than they could individually in those environments. And so let me give you an example. A lot of the audience is probably familiar with IMUs. High level, what they do is they measure, rates of rotation and accelerations, and they're in everything from your phone to your, Wii controller, or all these things. And they are only able to measure changes in motion. They can't tell you anything about where you are. Absolutely. So if you take a GPS receiver, GPS receivers, they can tell you where you are really accurately. And so if we combine these two things together, one of the things you could start to do is obviously use the GPS to initialize the position. And then you can use the IMU to literally integrate forward your position, meaning I'm going to start at some known point and then use the relative motion of that IMU to understand where I am, given an additional condition. The second more powerful thing you can do is start to actually even understand, well, at the end of that, I'm going to get a GPS position, and I'm going to also see where my IMU kind of took me to. That'll create some error. I can learn something from that error and start to actually calibrate my IMUs in real time. And so you can take what is like a pretty cheap, like $2 IMU, and make it perform something like $1,000 IMU because you're able to real-time calibrate out these like biases and errors that happen from making these parts cheap. Uh, Sensor fusion is that kind of superpower that allows you to do stuff like that. And just realized this is video I meant to have playing. This is an example of what that looks like. So there's a red car that you see. That's our solution. It's running on what is extremely low cost automotive grade hardware. And then underneath the red car, there's a yellow car that you can't quite see yet. That yellow car is running a system that costs like $150,000. It's kind of like the same technology that's in the head of a missile. So it's like very, very high-end stuff. And what we've done here is we drove in like the hardest environment you could imagine for GPS, which is underneath a parking garage. This is actually the Costco in San Francisco, which Phil, I'm sure
I was
you
just about to say, I know that parking garage.
not only difficult because you're underneath a Costco, but it's also chaos to try to drive there. So you're stopping.
Absolute chaos. People, cars, service animals, just all sorts of, yeah, yeah.
And so the idea here is that you see the trajectory, the red and those yellow lines, they're like right on top of each other. And this is actually a sped up video. The clock in the right there is showing you wall clock, and like we're already 3 minutes in. You're starting to see that there's actually now like a difference between these two vehicles. Now, the imagery is the roof, so it's a little bit off, just full disclosure. But these cars are going to go do a lap, and then what we're going to do is come back and actually park in the same spot. And the trick is to understand like who's actually right, because it turns out it's really hard to measure, even with this $150,000 crazy system we have. It's not even perfect. So both systems seem to come back to where they are. So we're going to go do another lap around the parking lot here. We've been underground for almost 5 minutes. And that means no GPS, nothing. We're basically using this couple dollar IMU sensor and some of the sensors off of the car. We're going to go do a big lap, come back around, and then really see, okay, who is right.
Yeah, there's starting to be quite a bit of drift, it looks like here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what we're seeing already is that survey grade thing, that $150,000 yellow car, is way off. And it's wild because that thing is got such a higher end sensor in it, but it's not taking advantage of all the opportunities of sensor fusion that exist in the system. And so it goes to show that the power of the algorithm outweighs the power of like having some crazy sensor. So everyone's like obsessed with, oh, I'm gonna have like the best LiDAR, I'm gonna have the best IMU. Actually, it turns out that like the best software is really powerful. That's why we've kind of like focused on that problem. And you could build things that are pretty amazing like this as a result. So I'm a big believer in algorithm over, the just raw horsepower of what you're bringing to the table. And then, so we put this all in a box. It's a thing that we call Atlas. And we have customers that use this for benchmark testing autonomous driving platforms, to literally using in production on level 4 autonomy cars. And it really helps them do what we talked about, which is make their perception stacks work so much better because they can rely on the location that's coming off of this box.
So what we've got a question here from the
Yeah.
chat already, which is, so what's the actual like input to this Atlas box, and what's the actual output?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what's coming into this box are basically the GPS signals. So we have an antenna that's just kind of similar to what you'd have on any car. We've got a correction data source, which is our network that we talked about kind of in the beginning of the presentation. And then we've got inside the box an IMU, which is that couple dollar part that I was talking about that measures accelerations and rotations. And then the last piece is it's connected to the vehicle's CAN bus. And so CAN is kind of the network that all cars use. And all we're doing with that is reading literally the ABS, analog braking systems, wheel sensors, which just tells us like how the wheels are turning. So with those inputs alone, we were able to demonstrate this kind of performance. And if I was to reveal a secret, It's actually the hardest thing about this is getting the calibration right. And so what we learned very early on in our journey was, uh, mathematically, like if you did this in simulation, a lot of things are easier because you know, like exactly like even like the wheel diameter changes as the tire pressure is different. All these little things. You
Yeah, or the temperature, right? That'll
yeah,
affect things. Like, yeah.
yeah, number of people in the car, like all this kind of stuff. So it turns out that like that sensor fusion, the like flip side of it is that it does this like automatic cross calibration between your sensors, and that's the magic that actually makes it work. So by making that automatic and just thing that's a feature of the software, we made it like incredibly easy to scale this out and basically quickly put it in a box. So that's kind of the first piece of the problem as we see it. So with that, that's not even enough because it turns out there are places that it gets even harder. If you think about the Costco trip that we just did, I may have in some future world, a valet feature of my car, and I'm shopping and it's really bad traffic, and the thing's trying to find a parking spot for 15 minutes for some reason, which I think in San Francisco we've all done. So there's a there is a limit because eventually even our system or any system will have error because you're integrating an eye view. And so how do you get something like that absolute accuracy from GNSS when you can't see satellites? And that is where actually more sensor fusion comes in. So, but this, I think, will be really interesting to the folks from the OpenCV community because this is where we actually start to use computer vision ourselves. Um, Turns out that you can bring cameras or lidars to the party because you can use them also to solve the problem of location. But it's interesting because you do it from a perspective of building a map and then using that map. Now, a lot of the audience is probably familiar with the concept of SLAM, where people will use this for indoor robotics or sometimes outdoor robotics to basically build a map online and then navigate on that map at the same time. Um, you know, for instance, like Roombas do this. They do very simple SLAM indoors, and a lot of outdoor robotics, I guess, also. Um, the problem with SLAM is that the map that it creates is in some arbitrary frame. It's not tied to a latitude and longitude. So it's actually very difficult to, for instance, share that across the fleet or to be able to line it up with external maps that you may have from like a provider. Like we talked about somebody who mapped all the lanes of the city and used that for information. So the question was, how do we combine the powers of those two things together? We built this thing we call VMAP. It's a very creative name here, and I'll show the video while I'm talking through this. We took the difficulty of the Costco example and amped it up a bit. We said, okay, well, what if we found a parking garage that was 5 stories underground and then drove down and then drove back up? So luckily, Stanford built one for us. And what
Right
you
on.
see here is there's a video in the top left corner. And what we did is we have these red dots that are basically features that the system learned to identify as interesting. Now, some folks may look at this and be like, "Oh yeah, those are features that we're just detecting in that image."
Very,
That's
very
not
classic computer vision stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it turns out that's not what that is. What that is actually we've reprojected a 3D map into the image, and it looks this way because the location is so accurate that open loop, those pixels to the human eye look like they are right on all these different, features that you would expect a feature detector to come on. So this is actually the features reprojected into the image from our map. And so what our system does is, a classic relocalization, meaning that it takes an image from the camera and then it says, I'm going to find these features on the image. I'm going to match those to a map that was built ahead of time. And then that gives me some information about where that camera must be. And then we've been able to couple that information back into the full system I talked about before with the IMU, the GNSS, all this calibration. And so we've done this sensor fusion at this very, very grand scale where we're combining the camera, the IMU, the high precision GNSS with the network, and brought it all together in concert. Uh, and so this capability allows you to navigate, like in an underground parking garage, as an example, indefinitely, because every time that you are able to relocalize around the map, you've completely registered yourself. You completely know where you are. And so that like time window that we showed, in that first demonstration video actually resets back to zero. And so it's a incredibly powerful technique. Now, some of you may wonder, like, well, that all sounds great. How did you get the map? Like, like where did that come from? And this is actually the reason that absolute location is so important. It turns out that when you have the capability to drive for 7 minutes or something underground already, you can build the map on the same vehicles over time. And so the way that like this VMAP technology actually works, and the way that we built this like demonstration video, I'll just play it again as I'm speaking, uh, is actually kind of clever. What we said was we could just drive this parking garage 2, 3 times and then memorize all the data that we got there. Now, what changes is everything you see here is happening in real time. But when I build the map, I have all that data and I can look at it in a batch process. I don't have to make decisions causally. I can kind of like look at everything all at once. And so we take all of the positions, we take all of the features, and we optimize that in one gigantic process. And then we're able to actually build out the map based on more or less the best information that we had from any number of drives. Now, since we have such good pose already coming from this inertial system that we built, it doesn't take many drives. So this map was built with, I think, 2 or maybe 3 drives that we did of the underground area here. And then we went back several weeks later to actually see that we could relocalize. And that actually is really hard because when you think about it, in a parking garage, like all the cars are in different places, all these other things that, change in the environment are not there anymore. So you have to still be robust to the fact that, like, yeah, a lot of the environment's actually completely new, but all the, concrete beams and other features in the garage are still there. And so this is really something that I think is super cool because it brings together this process of absolute location, utilizing the fleet to build a map, and then showing that you can use that map to make any one of those cars navigate really effectively, even in these completely like extremely difficult environments.
Yeah,
So
it's like using all the tools in the toolbox at the same
yeah,
time. Like,
we just took the toolbox out and dumped it out.
hey,
Okay.
sometimes that's what you got to do.
Yeah. And so we took it one step further too. It's one thing to do it in a parking garage, but then we said, well, why can't we just do this across all of San Francisco or downtown at least, where it's hard? And so we did. We took one car, we drove it, I don't know, over the course of a week or so, and we actually just organically built this map of this area. For those of you not familiar, is kind of where all the tall buildings are in San Francisco.
I can see my house from here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is all done with like a single camera that is honestly not that great a camera. You can see this is a real image off of this system there. And so it's very cool that you're able to do this with very low cost sensors at scale and build something that ultimately gives you that like centimeter level accuracy, even inside of a parking structure. Um, Now, of course, if you have a bigger budget, or eventually LiDAR is going to become something that I do think will be almost cost competitive with cameras, um, the same thing applies. This video is a single Ouster 64 beam scanner, which like it's a good piece of equipment, but it's nothing like amazing. And what we did was we coupled it with this Atlas product that we make, and we show here open loop, no scan matching, no optimization. This is what it looks like. You're able to basically see uh, that there is no drift. There is incredible alignment because you have highly accurate location now with this super high resolution sensor. And it's, I think, just really empowering to see what happens when you take high precision location that you can trust and add this, perception that we all work on in the CV community. And I think that, there's this is the only formula in my presentation, and it's not very technical here, but when you add precision satellite navigation, sensor fusion with IMUs and other sensors, and then you add cameras and LiDARs, with technologies like VMAP or other algorithms that folks build, you can really accomplish what I think is kind of the holy grail around absolute location everywhere. And that's kind of our mission as a company, is to enable developers, people building the next best things, whether it's, lawnmower robots, autonomous cars, making delivery services more efficient. It is all of those use cases. Everything that moves is basically going to need something like this. And so we want to empower developers to go and build those solutions, and use what we've built to get to their actual destination. That's kind of the whole story. I want to close with maybe like one idea, which I think is pretty cool. There's this whole world where everything I talked about is about making like one robot better, one car, one lawnmower, whatever it is, right? There's a world where that changes, where we have millions of these things operating, and now they're actually able to work in what I love to call multiplayer mode, where you can imagine like in a car situation where there's an accident in the left lane, all the autonomous vehicles are communicating with one another about their location and the location of an event, and able to start like magically zipper merging, whatever, 100 meters ahead of that incident, and like the perception never even saw that there was something that happened. It is entirely coordinated just through this amazing combination of robots being able to perfectly communicate and have perfect location. And so I'm super excited by that as a concept, and you can imagine all the other places that this comes to fruition. There's literally an example of companies using this kind of technology to prevent accidents, like with railroad workers, where they wear like a little high precision GPS sensor, and the train also has that. So way before anybody could hear a train coming or anything, there's an alert that can actually stop the train if there's like something on the tracks or something like this. So it's, I mean, literally like life-saving technology, but also
Yeah, the human safety aspects here are just mind-blowing.
yeah. Um, and so, that's why I'm super excited by what we're able to do. And, I think this is, it's an amazing technology that I think more people should know is possible.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot today about the state of the art. That getting down to that, centimeter, sub-centimeter accuracy is totally wild to me because again, like yourself, I've been around the block a few times, literally and figuratively, with the GPS and GNSS and all that stuff. And yeah, super impressive stuff, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And, I think if folks are interested to learn more, I mean, we've got our website and all that good stuff. But yeah, I'm happy to obviously help folks get started and really see what's possible.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, scan that code, folks. Where can folks find you on? Are you on like the LinkedIn or Blue Sky or whatever these days?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn mostly, and obviously our website at point1nav.com. We've got explanations of all the technology and ways to get
Hmm.
started. We work with a lot of partners. The guys at SparkFun as an example. We are contributors to their open source elements as well. And so
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of ways to engage with us. But our website is definitely the best way to start.
Right on. Yeah, let's do me a favor and go ahead and unshare your screen here,
Yeah.
and I will take this opportunity to do our giveaway, folks. One of the things that we do on every episode of OpenCV Live is a giveaway to you in the audience. The person that answers the trivia question that I am about to ask will win the OpenCV course of their choosing, absolutely free. As a reminder, if you have won in the last couple of months, please do not answer and give someone else a chance to win. I'm talking to you, Trivia Shark Partha. We have a Trivia Shark, Aaron. I don't know if you're aware of this. I have a feeling the Trivia Shark will chew this one up, but we talked quite a bit today, surprisingly to me, about the DARPA Grand Challenge. Aaron was a participant in this in his university days, apparently. The DARPA Grand Challenge has a really deep connection with OpenCV. So, in the Zoom chat with it set to everyone and not hosts and panelists, please tell me what was the name of the first car to successfully complete the DARPA Grand Challenge in 2005? I think you folks are going to know this one. Oh man, I might have stumped him. We'll see. We'll see. Oh, there we go. We got Ibekekeme. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name there. I probably butchered it. But the answer we were looking for was Stanley. Stanley, the Volkswagen Touareg, I believe, part of a team with our OpenCV's own Gary Bradsky in 2005. In fact, it finished the DARPA Grand Challenge with what was essentially an early version of OpenCV. So, shout out to Stanley out there. Our trivia winner, please send one email to me. That's phil@opencv.org, PHIL at opencv.org, with the name of the course that you would like. You can find out what courses are available by going to opencv.org/university. Pick any one of those, send me an email about it, and I will make sure that you get that added to your OpenCV courses dashboard. I've got a couple of good questions here and a few minutes left to get them out. So one of the folks that's in almost every episode of this show, Awab Jonas, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is asking about. This may be a longer answer than we have time for, but like, what is the real difference between something like Atlas and the all the sensors and tech that's just in a commodity like iPhone?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, the answer is not. There's not much different. Like they have the same types of sensors. They've got GPS. They've got IMU. The big thing that's different. There's a few elements I'll highlight quickly. The antenna that is at your phone versus like on a car, it's categorically different. The thing in your phone is more or less a glorified like paperclip. the
Bent in a really interesting way.
Yes,
That's
exactly. And it makes a big difference for like high precision. Uh, the other thing that I will say is that your phone, the invisible part of what's different is you hold it in all number of different ways. It might be your pocket, in your hand, and that changes the physics part of what we do. On a car, we know a lot about like the physics constraints. Like unless you're in Tokyo Drift or something, like the car will move in a relatively predictable manner. And that helps us a lot in the whole sensor fusion part. There are ways to apply that kind of stuff to phones. It is way more complicated, but I will give you a preview. That is something we are working on too. So yes, it's very cool.
yeah,
Great question.
yeah, great answer. Thanks for the question. Amit also here in the chat would like to know a bit more about using this system for, say, would you say that this is a good system to choose or to sort of start working with if the things you're working on are explicitly indoor items, things that basically never leave, a building of some kind?
Yeah, I think, today, a lot of the topics I talked about apply for indoor. Our specific focus is on outdoor and indoor hybrid type of things. Uh, if you're working exclusively on indoor, there's a lot of really other interesting technologies like ultra wideband as an example, that ultimately are like the equivalent kind of like a GPS that you could set up inside. But you can take advantage of the fact that like you're, for instance, operating in the warehouse. And so there's really great techniques there. And then also, SLAM indoors is really actually quite good. I would say that it's especially with the LiDAR technology that's out there and now getting really low cost, indoor localization that used to be extremely difficult is becoming, actually tractable, especially for industrial applications.
Yeah,
What
a lot of this tech is really becoming commoditized in the good way. That like it's you can just go off the shelf with so much of this stuff that it would, 5 years ago, not the case. You're talking to the people that make it, and it's going to cost you 10 grand a piece. And yeah,
the one I will add to that, this is my favorite example, is there's an indoor robotics company, and their way that they localize their robots, they just print barcodes on the floor, and then they
yeah.
like have a barcode reader. It's that
Hmm.
simple. It's just like
Hey,
like it works.
yeah, why not? Um, yeah. Well, I think that is about it for today, folks. Thanks so much to our esteemed guest, Aaron. This was a really interesting episode. I learned quite a bit about the state of the art of location and the precision that's possible now is like just kind of, it's
Yeah.
making me think of a whole bunch of other stuff. Um, yeah, so thanks so much for that. Maybe we'll have you back sometime soon. I don't know. Like if you're going to that thing, that Bay Area Robotics Network meetup, I'll probably see you there.
Yeah, I'm actually
If you're
speaking on
all
Tuesday.
right,
Yes,
fantastic.
and yeah, thank you again for having me. It was
Hmm.
awesome to have the conversation, and I'm an OpenCV user of over 20 years. Thank you
Hey,
for everything that you guys are doing. It's awesome.
that's so great to hear. We really appreciate it, and I'll pass that along to the guys that actually the guys and gals that actually write the code. um, yeah, thanks so much. Most importantly, to you out there watching this show, this is the 156th episode of OpenCV Live, and we don't plan to stop anytime soon. Next week, we have a tutorial from Dr. Satya Malik, who will be back. He'll be showing how to build your own NERF setup, a free tutorial from OpenCV University, so do not miss that. It will be right here, same bat time, same bat channel, 9 a.m. Pacific time next Thursday. Thanks so much to you all for letting us hit that 100K subscriber mark on YouTube. It's still kind of surreal to us over here, but we will do our best to make it worth your while. We're working on the membership options for our YouTube channel as well, so you'll be able to give us a couple of bucks there. And join us next week for this interesting tutorial on how to build your own, 3D neural radiance fields using the OpenCV University. This is unfortunately 2 weeks in a row that we've got some bad news to close the show, but it doesn't have to be so bad. Last week we said, happy trails to the great baseball announcer and famously bad baseball player Bob Uecker. May he rest in peace. And of course, right after we went off the air last week, the great artist David Lynch passed away, 78 years old. Cannot put into words how much the art of David Lynch has affected my life and so many of the people that I know and love. And so, I'll leave you with this one, which is it's about 53 degrees here in San Francisco, California, and it looks like we're going to have blue skies and beautiful golden sunshine all along the way. We'll see you next time. Adios.
Thanks, Phil.